Welcome. This is the supplemental part of the social responsibility lecture. And here, what I want to do is just go over a few things related to um, values across countries. And this is really meant to kind of supplement also the culture discussion, because this is a bit of an alternative to things like the World Values Survey. Um, Now, one of the things that's interesting about what's here, and I just need to explain to you sort of what it was, is imagine if you were playing a game, and in the game you were presented with a whole series of different social values or legal rights and things of that nature. And what we did in this game is we said, okay, look, we're going to show you five different things or six different things, and more or less what you've got to do is you've got to keep the things you want. You have to throw away something. And in other words, you have to kind of give up a card. So it'd be like playing a card game where you sort of say, okay, you get to keep um, a card permanently, or you get to keep a couple cards and you could throw away. You've got, but to do that, you've got to throw away an equivalent number of cards. And it turns out if you do this again and again and again and again with a long sequence of things, you essentially can come up with a utility-based ordering, which allows you to literally look at the relative value that individuals would put on certain things. So it's similar to some sense to those attribute models I gave you before, except it's a little quicker to do, and there are variations of it that you can do, but it's essentially allows you to get something which is significantly better than asking people whether they care about something, and is generally speaking fairly better, better to some degree, over just asking them to rank order things. So for example, you'll see a lot of times in surveys, people will say, okay, well, on a 10-point scale, tell us how important food and health is to your life. And what you find is if you do that, people will say, oh, it's important. And you ask them, okay, well, how about crime and public safety? And they'll say, oh, that's important too. And how about global security? Yeah, global security is pretty important. And so what you tend to do is you tend to get this effect where individuals don't pay a price for answering a survey question. In other words, they can tell you everything's important. In this situation here, if you think health and food and health is very important, and is put in opposition to, say, global economic well-being or global security, which one of those are you going to toss out of your consideration set, so that when you see, it's basically gone forever. You don't get to be able to see it again. Therefore, you pay a price to keep health, food, and health. You have to give up something, and that turns out to generate both a rank ordering but also relative valuations. So in this graph, what you have is you actually have a picture of how individuals sort of played this game across general categories. So the categories are things like civil and personal liberties, like the right to free speech; food and health, like access to health care; individual economic well-being, which is the cost of living, how much income you make, and so on down the line. And you can go through all these, rights to basic services, or things that like rights, everybody gets a right to education, everybody gets a right to health care. Societal economic well-being, again, different, looking at the well-being of society. And then commercial rights are things like, the right to set up a business; animal welfare is kind of obvious; minority rights are the rights of minority groups in the society, including gender and stuff like that. So you can look at this and you can sort of say, okay, well, if I look across a range of countries, and in our case, what we did is we looked at the United States, Australia, the UK, Germany, and the Czech Republic. That what you see here is clearly civil liberties matters, but effectively what this shows you is it shows you the ordering of priorities. Okay, so you don't have to worry so much about what the percents mean at the bottom. but effectively what it would say civil liberties, which is approximately, let's say, 65%. If civil liberties were to compete with environmental sustainability, which is about 45%, then it's, the preferences are such that civil liberties is about 1.5 times the valuation of sustainability, which means if they were competing against one another, you have an odds of 1.5 to 1, or 65 to 45 to pick civil liberties over sustainability. But it also gives you the rank ordering. So if you look at this, it kind of gives you a feel for this. This is actually a really good way to look at these things, and you can see how they differ across countries. So for example, if you look at the USA and Germany, they actually look fairly similar. So things like commercial rights, global social well-being, minority rights, global economic well-being, these things are actually quite low here. They're quite low here. Civil liberties, food and health, local crime, public safety, equality of opportunities. These things are actually all high elsewhere. The only one here there's a difference is actually the individual economic well-being versus societal well-being. And in the case of Germany, those things flip relative to the US. But the interesting thing about this is when you do these types of analyses, you actually see lots of similarities. Australia, as an example, again, very similar. Food and health is higher in Australia than civil liberties and other things. But the interesting thing about all of this, right, is look at environmental sustainability. And it's basically kind of in the middle. It's in the middle across all of them, right? So it's in the middle here. It's in the middle across these countries as well. And in fact, this is something that we see quite a lot. Come back to this in a second. So essentially, one of the things that has come from sort of kind of doing this sort of work was that there's actually remarkable similarity across countries. In other words, if you look at the things which are kind of up here, as opposed to the things that are down here, the things that are up here are typically things that are very close to people's lives. The things that are down here are actually things which are quite distant. In other words, people tend to think about things which are very much close to them, and they don't care about things that are global. So in that sense, it tells you something about the nature of the way in which you would appeal to these individuals. And in fact, in applying this type of work, and in fact, one of the reasons we did this type of work was to sort of say, okay, well, how would you actually kind of make an appeal to individuals? Well, you would make an appeal to individuals, even if it was something like global security. You wouldn't tell them about global security, because global security is actually, relatively speaking, low. What you want to do is you want to try to show this is actually really related to this. Okay. And in a lot of the work that we've done, we've actually said, don't talk to people about environmental sustainability, talk to them about food and health. And if you can turn environmental sustainability into a health issue, you're much better off in terms of getting people's response than if what you do is you try to get people to prioritize environmental sustainability, because if you move this up, something else has to move down. And the things up at the top are very resilient to being to movement, which means that trying to kind of break into these top 5 or 6 categories is actually really quite hard. Okay. And again, the Czech Republic is effectively similar in terms of this. The nice thing about this is we not only talk about it in general categories, but we actually talk about it across the individual issues, right? So there are about 110 of these. You could actually go in and you can look at these things in detail. You can also look at what things are kind of at the top and what things are at the bottom, and these effectively start to make up the things that you think are material in terms of things that would matter. So basically, a lot of the things that are related to commercial activity or related to global activities, and tend to be at the bottom. Now, but this is kind of an interesting aspect of this, because one of the implications of this is related to sustainability, which is why I want to give this kind of talk. Okay. Um, and the thing that um, we talk about with respect to this is um, there are some general beliefs about what matters, amongst individuals, um, in terms of sort of kind of thinking about this. Um, do people who have more income, more wealth, seem to value the environment more? Yeah, but not that much more. Better educated people do? No, the answer is no. Culture, again, doesn't seem to matter. Infrastructure, ability to act, yeah, maybe that seems to matter. But again, we come back to this issue of context, which is an example of this. And one of my favorite examples of this was the use of smart meters, which are being promoted quite heavily in the United Kingdom right now. And what you find with respect to the smart meters is that there are different ways to sort of kind of save energy. You could save 2.75% by turning off a window air conditioner for 30 minutes. You can save 2.7% by turning off 200-watt bulbs for 5 hours a day. Okay, or you can increase electricity rates by 11.6%. Okay, and when governments see this, they actually sort of say, well, there's no way we can increase the price by 11%. So what we want to do is we want to try to use some behavioral ways of trying to get individuals to do these things, because these things appear to be easier than, or lead to less kind of negative consumer reaction than increasing the prices. Okay. But there are also some kind of interesting studies associated with this. In other words, what most people have seen is when individuals are sort of kind of put into neighbor comparison studies, where their energy is compared to others. So you'll see sometimes on energy things, this is a neighbor comparison. How much do you use relative to your neighbors? These experiments basically gave them fake data. The fake data more or less said you're using too much energy. The question is do people respond to those comparisons? The answer is they do initially, but then they actually return back to their base rate. Okay. There are what are known as the Hawthorne effect studies, where individuals were told they had smart meters, actually believe, but actually didn't have smart meters. And then some people were given smart meters, but not told they were given smart meters. And others were given smart meters and told that they had smart meters. And one of the questions was, what was really going on here? And in this case here, what they found is they found that despite all the fact that the participants wanted to save and learn about electricity, all the survey responses were here. What they found is the entire effect was of smart meters was a Hawthorne effect. It was basically driven by the fact that people thought, people were responding to the experiment of having these things installed, but that after a month, the energy utilization had reverted back. And so one of the things that's kind of interesting about this is one of the reasons why governments want to do these types of activities is because this is so difficult for them. In other words, no politician wants to be in power when they increase energy prices by 11%. But the reality is that trying to incentivize people, or at least nudge them to do these types of things, which lead to an equivalent amount of savings via things like these neighborhood comparison studies, like these Hawthorne effect studies, by smart meters, more or less has no impact. And this is kind of very telling, because what it's doing is it's telling you something about the nature of the activities that individuals are involved in. A number of other studies which have done similar sorts of things, which have looked at kind of attempts at getting people, for example, to eat healthier by providing calorie labeling, getting individuals to be more conscious of what they were spending by using kind of red light, green light systems for whether something was healthy or not healthy. These things have almost always fallen exactly the same type of effects here. That is, there seem to be some kind of immediate effects, but ultimately individuals kind of fall back onto their habitual characterizations. And the other aspect of this, which is kind of interesting, is you go back to those preference studies. Okay, one of the things that we were interested in is we were interested in sort of saying, okay, well, what can we look at with respect to these types of things? Okay, these issues here. Okay, and so one of the things that we did, just as an example to show you, is to take individuals who are here. Okay, we look at environmental sustainability. And what we want to do is we want to know what happens, or who are the people who are in the in different categories. Okay, so even though those things that I gave you were very much the averages, there are groups of individuals out there who are effectively category killers with respect to environmental preference. In other words, they rank environmental preference very high. And then there's some people who rate it high, some rate it moderate, some rate it low, and some rate it very low. Right. So one way to think about it is there's 16 categories of things. These individuals who rate it very high, they would rate it 1 or 2. These would rate it 3 or 4. These would rate it, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this would be 9, 10, 11, 12, and very low would be the remainder. So you got about 12% of a sample. This is the Germans, right? Who, let's say, fall into this very high category, right? So they put a lot of emphasis on environmental sustainability. And this is the distribution of everybody's kind of preferences. Okay, one of the questions is, well, what's the difference between this group here, let's say, and this group here? Well, gender, the answer is no. Age, the answer is no. Happiness, the answer is no. Okay, Machiavellianism, which is a scale, the answer is yes. There seems to be individuals who don't care about the environment are slightly more Machiavellian. Belief in God, the answer is no. Okay. The party affiliation, so this is the various parties, they're more likely to be a Green supporter. Okay, the rest of this is CDU, SDP, FDP, kind of traditional parties. Linko, which is the extreme left. Again, nothing here. So individuals who actually have these very high environmental preferences, yeah, they are much more likely to be Green Party supporter. What else do they do? Are they more likely to volunteer? The answer appears to be yes. Are they more likely to donate money? The answer appears to be yes. Are they likely to donate more money? Well, that's not the case. But as a percent of income, they're donating more. Okay, so and you can kind of work your way through it. And where do they donate? Well, they donate much more, but not a huge amount more, but certainly much more to environmental groups. Okay, and then the amount that they donate is, relatively speaking, small. So you can look at this and sort of say, well, what are are there observable characteristics here? The answer is no, not here. The only real observable characteristic is a Green supporter in terms of the politicians. But remember, but still, if you look over here, there's still a fair number of SDP, CDU supporters here as well. But there do also seem to be kind of donating. But again, these are not huge differences. Okay, so you look at this and you sort of can say, okay, well, there are some differences here that we can sort of see, but it's not necessarily as clear as you would otherwise see. Okay, And then you can break this down if you wanted to. In other words, of the environmental issues, which are the environmental issues that really matter, right? So this is the score that they give overall. So these are obviously very, very extreme in terms of the weights. This one's very high. What is it that they sort of kind of put their emphasis on? Well, they put their emphasis on pollution, industrial pollution, and energy utilization and deforestation. Okay, so they're even though they kind of put it on a lot here, they don't seem to blame individuals, right? Um, Recycling is they're not, kind of materially that much different. Um, their concerns about climate change are kind of high as well, and loss of biodiversity. So you could see which issues kind of appear. And one of the reasons I go through this example here is more or less to kind of try and emphasize this issue of kind of how you start to think about these types of things. And an example there at the end is really kind of related just to the environmental side of things, but to show, when you're using kind of these more sophisticated methods, a lot of the obvious things don't appear. Gender doesn't appear to be a big difference. Um, Age doesn't appear to be a big difference, right? What you see is it's mainly revealed through other behaviors. Right. So what do we conclude about all of this? Put all of this together. The answer is the consumers are only one stakeholder, but they do have interactions across other stakeholder groups that matter. Okay. And our view of consumer social responsibility implies customers care about other stakeholders, but the key is whether they internalize this into their decision models and valuation equations. What we find is we find context overwhelms most other factors. I'll give some examples of this in the synchronous lecture. Individuals are less influenced by their backgrounds and intents than they are by context and circumstance. And that model that I gave you in some sense tells you, well, you can start kind of at least looking at the nature of that decision model and what the context is intending to do. So is the context intending to generate emotion? Is it intending to force kind of more impulse purchasing? Is it attempting to force more rationality? Is it meant to be a kind of cognitive load enhancer in the sense that it makes you more calculative or more habitual? If you're more habitual, you rely on heuristics. In terms of sort of a kind of general preferences, this latter set of data that I've just given you, we tend to see things like proximity matters. Individuals are much more likely to be concerned about issues that are close to them. And attempts at demographic characterizations are going to be real problems. And I use that example of Germany in the environmental one, just as a kind of very simple way to see that essentially, Germans who are concerned about the environment reveal it by their support of the Green Party. Other than that, they're no younger than others. They're no richer or poorer than others. They're no more male or female than others. If you attempted to sort of say, oh, well, Green Party supporters are on average younger or wealthier or more educated, et cetera, you'd actually find that isn't true. So that kind of one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is by looking at it the way we kind of presented it to you. There's the issue there becomes one of kind of a category of preferences of issues. And one of the implications of this is that for an issue to rise in an individual's preferences, some other issues have to fall. And this is generally speaking going to be difficult. And that is, you can say, well, how do I get individuals to give up things that they have historically wanted or prioritized? And the answer is I probably can't do that. So what I want to do is I potentially want to redefine issues. So in the case of the environment, what we tell companies and government is we say, don't basically bang on people about environmental sustainability. Don't do the Al Gore gloom and doom, the world is going to die type of things. Focus on things that matter to individuals, their children's schooling, health, intergenerational transfers, anything which essentially kind of recategorizes the issue will be much more valuable in terms of sort of kind of inducing behavioral change than trying to get individuals to reorganize their priorities. And then finally, we go back to this thing that I've always talked about, and that is that heterogeneity resides at the level of individuals. And what this means is it means that even in the case of consumer social responsibility, or if you want to call it ethical consumption, um, don't think about kind of trying to go beyond what it is that the individual is doing, what the individual is thinking, how the individual prioritize things. And what you will find if you do it that way is that you'll find that individuals will have behavioral similarities in the sense that they will act and be involved with things which reveal aspects of their preferences. Which means that if you were wanting to sell green products, you don't necessarily go after individuals in Germany based on age or income or education. What you do is you go after them based upon their political support, because that seems to be the most predictive thing with respect to environmental preferences. But when you look at this, you really are ultimately looking at it at the individual level. Don't make overly stylized sorts of assumptions. Don't attempt to sort of kind of think about things in very vague kind of belief-based or intent-based survey responses. These are notoriously weak. So with that, that's the end of the supplement, and thank you for listening.